Wounded Knee, 1973. The Prelude, the 1960s, a time of upheaval in the United States. The war in Vietnam and the civil rights movement reshaped the nation, fueling social change against a backdrop of iconic music and cultural shifts. Amid this tumultuous era, a new force emerged, the American Indian Movement, AM, founded in 1968 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as a voice for Native Americans. Under leaders like Clyde Belcourt and Dennis Banks, AM aimed to transform urban life for Native Americans by addressing poverty, discrimination, and harsh policing. They launched neighborhood patrols to prevent unjust treatment of Native residents and bring solidarity to their communities. In 1972, AIM undertook the Trail of Broken Treaties, rallying around 900 supporters who journeyed from Seattle to Washington, D.C., stopping along reservations to highlight Native grievances. The protest culminated in a bold takeover of the Bureau of Indian Affairs building. After tense negotiations with White House officials, AIM secured a promise to address Native communities' economic, social, and educational challenges. However, tragedy soon struck. In February of 1972, the death of Raymond Yellow Thunder in Gordon, Nebraska, sparked AIM's occupation of the local community hall, demanding justice. Meanwhile, tensions flared as Wesley Bad Hartbull was killed in South Dakota. AIM's protests ignited more than spirits. The courthouse and Chamber of Commerce in Custer, South Dakota, were destroyed by fire. The government, now perceiving AIM as a militant force, escalated its surveillance. On the Pine Ridge Reservation, frustration with tribal President Richard Wilson's leadership prompted residents to seek AIM's help. Wilson faced allegations of misusing authority and funds, leading to an attempted impeachment. When the effort failed, the U.S. Department of Justice dispatched U.S. Marshals to Pine Ridge to prevent further unrest. The Wounded Knee occupation begins on February 27, 1973. Around 200 members of the American Indian Movement, AIM, converged on Wounded Knee, South Dakota, a place revered by Native Americans and fraught with historical significance. This small village had been the site of the tragic 1890 massacre, where hundreds of Lakota Sioux men, women, and children lost their lives, leaving a painful scar in the memory of the Lakota people. The events of that massacre haunted the land, and now, nearly a century later, AIM saw Wounded Knee as the place to demand long-overdue justice for Native communities. The occupation unfolded as AIM members took control of key locations, including the trading post, museum, and nearby churches. From these sites, AIM leaders amplified their demands, calling for reforms and fair treatment for Native Americans who face severe socioeconomic challenges, systemic injustice, and inadequate political representation. Russell Means, a prominent AIM spokesperson, issued a powerful statement demanding congressional investigations into the conditions on reservations and scrutinizing the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, for policies that AIM argued had neglected and oppressed Native communities. As word of the occupation spread, federal authorities took swift action. U.S. Marshals and FBI agents were deployed to the area, establishing 6 roadblocks and multiple observation points around Wounded Knee. Despite these strict barriers, AIM members continued to find creative ways to bring in supplies, using hidden routes through the rugged landscape. Supporters from across the nation found ways to reach Wounded Knee, signaling solidarity with AIM's cause. The occupation quickly transformed into a fortified standoff, with AIM members digging trenches and constructing bunkers, relying on the combat experience of veterans within their ranks to organize and secure their positions. Tension permeated the village as the days wore on, and sporadic exchanges of gunfire between AIM members and federal agents marked the beginning of a historic confrontation. Each shot heightened the stakes, making it clear that neither side was prepared to back down easily. For AIM, this was not just a standoff, it was a stand for dignity, for the recognition of Native rights, and for justice that had been denied for too long. The occupation became a powerful symbol of resilience, as AIM members held their ground and sought to shine a light on the injustices that Native Americans had endured for generations. With both sides deeply entrenched, the standoff at Wounded Knee would become a defining moment in the struggle for Native rights in the United States, as AIM and their supporters pushed forward in their quest for reform and recognition. The echoes of Wounded Knee reverberated far beyond the village, rallying Native communities and drawing national attention to the continuing fight for justice. The turning point at Wounded Knee as the occupation continued, AIM leaders made their terms clear. If their grievances were acknowledged, they would consider ending the standoff. On March 1st, Senators James Abourezk and George McGovern arrived, joined by aides from Senator Ted Kennedy's office. The officials agreed to hold congressional committee hearings and transfer Bureau of Indian Affairs officers. Despite this, they maintained strict roadblocks around the area, restricting movement in and out of Wounded Knee. By March 4th, AIM issued a bold statement, proposing to leave peacefully if federal forces withdrew and allowed the Lakota people to handle the situation on their own. Ralph Erickson, a special assistant to the Attorney General, responded, offering AIM amnesty if they left Wounded Knee by March 8th, abandoned weapons, and identified themselves. But negotiations quickly faltered. On March 8th, the roadblocks were briefly removed. Yet instead of dispersing, AIM supporters saw it as a triumph. Supplies and more supporters flooded into Wounded Knee. Tensions escalated on March 11th, when AIM briefly detained 4 postal inspectors, suspecting them of gathering intelligence. Though they were quickly released, the roadblocks were reinstated, and the Lakota leaders took a daring step, declaring the independent Oglala Nation, Iowan, calling for a return to the terms of the 1868 treaty and asserting sovereignty. The Iowans' provisional government demanded transformative changes within the Bureau of Indian Affairs, meetings with U.S. representatives, removal of Richard Wilson as tribal president, and a suspension of the tribal constitution. They insisted that negotiations should be based on the 1868 treaty as equals. The next day, a firefight erupted when FBI agents pursued a van approaching the village, resulting in an FBI agent's injury. To support AIM and the Lakota, allies formed the Wounded Knee Legal Defense/Offense Committee, securing a deal allowing 6 lawyers to bring food daily into Wounded Knee from March 26th to March 31st. However, Wilson's forces intercepted the vehicles, seizing all food supplies and reigniting tension. Sporadic gunfire exchanges and fragile ceasefires marked the days, with both sides struggling for a resolution. On March 26th, heavy gunfire ensued after Wilson's forces set a roadblock beyond federal lines, injuring U.S. Marshal Lloyd Grimm and leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. The violence escalated. By April 2nd, 2 men, Frank Clearwater and Lawrence Lamont, had lost their lives. In response, another temporary ceasefire was declared. U.S. officials and AIM leaders attempted further talks, discussing AIM's complaints about harassment from Wilson's forces and misuse of tribal funds. On April 5th, after exhaustive negotiations, both sides reached a tentative agreement. AIM leader Russell Means agreed to surrender and face arrest, with AIM laying down arms by April 7th. In exchange, the government pledged a White House meeting to address AIM's call for treaty rights and reform. The endgame at Wounded Knee. Following his arrest, Russell Means was released on bond and left for Washington, D.C., yet tensions surrounding the occupation only grew. The agreement, intended to bring peace, quickly unraveled. Means insisted AIM at Wounded Knee had never agreed to lay down their arms before a White House meeting concluded. As April wore on, a new negotiation team arrived, led by Kent Frizzell, as the government continued to favor diplomacy over force. On May 5th, Leonard Garment, a presidential advisor, sent an urgent message to Frank Fools Crow, a respected Teton Sioux leader. The letter offered a White House meeting to re-examine the 1868 treaty, contingent on AIM's peaceful withdrawal from Wounded Knee. Both sides signed a dispossession agreement that day, laying out the steps for a peaceful resolution set for May 9th. By May 8th, with food, power, and medical supplies dwindling, half of the AIM community began to depart. Following the timetable, federal forces entered Wounded Knee the next morning, disarming and transporting the remaining AIM supporters to a roadblock for processing. Lawyers from AIM's Defense Committee observed each step. By day's end, the government had cleared all bunkers and completed the evacuation, marking the conclusion of A grueling 71-day standoff. The aftermath and legacy in the wake of Wounded Knee. A Senate proposal emerged on July 17th to establish an Indian Policy Review Committee. This joint resolution aimed to re-evaluate the relationship between Native Americans and the U.S. government and to forge policies reflecting Native interests. Despite the efforts, challenges continued. Russell Means faced and lost a bid for tribal president in Pine Ridge against Richard Wilson in 1974, all while standing trial in St. Paul, Minnesota, for charges related to the occupation. After an arduous 8-month trial, all charges against Means and Dennis Banks were dismissed. Yet, the struggle for Pine Ridge was far from over. In the 3 years following the occupation, Pine Ridge saw an unsettling wave of violence, resulting in the highest per capita murder rate in the nation, with even FBI agents among those lost. Today, Pine Ridge remains the largest community in one of America's most economically challenged counties, a powerful reminder of resilience amidst hardship. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new videos from us. What do you think about today's topic? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found the video helpful, feel free to share it with your friends and family. We hope you had a great time. See you in the next video with even more exciting content. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out.